Okay, people. I decided to check out Omni Loop. This is the new film from Bernardo Britto, who wrote, directed. He also edits the film. It is produced by David Honjosa, Nelson Hernandez, Patrick Donovan, Benjamin Cohen. It's executive produced by Christine de Sousa Gelb, Pamela Koffler, Kevin Rowe, and Christine Vacon. It is line produced by Shanae Cage. Caitlin Aurelia Smith took care of the music. Ava Benjamin Shaw was on cinematography. Martin Anderson edits alongside Brito. Casting was taken care of by Taylor Williams and Kate Geller. Katie Birmingham was production design. Gabriel Ducroix is art direction. Set decoration, we have Chantel Adams. James Neal is costume design. We've got Mary Chipman, Lauren Citera, Monet Howard, Geraldine Sanville, Raquel Salidvar, Cashley Shepherd, and Yvette Villanova, all taking care of hair, makeup, all of that jazz, right? And our cast. Well, Mary-Louise Parker is Zoya Lowe. A younger version of Zoya is played by, the young version of Zoya is played by Riley Fincher-Foster. The college age Zoya is played by Madison Bullock. Zoya is married to Donald, who is played by Carlos Jacott. A college age Donald is played by Jacob Bond. So Donald and Zoya have a daughter, Jane, who is played by Hannah Pearl Utt. She is married to Chris Whitstake. Well, no, she's married to Morris, who is played by Chris Whitstake. Right? Zoya's mother, Sandra, is played by Fern Katz. Zoya befriends Paula, played by Ayo Edebiri. We've got Adam, played by Stephen Meyer. There is a resident at her mum's care home who is played by Jennifer Bassey. We have got Professor Duisberg, played by Harris Yulin. There's Mark, played by Eddie Cahill. Louise, played by Efren Hernandez. The Nanoscopic Man, played by James Benson. Taxi Driver is played by Rick Moose. Dr. Letterman is played by James Healy Jr. The Lawyer, played by Roberto Escobar. I think that's the main lot of people, really. The hospital receptionist, played by Amanda Tavares. The nurse, played by Esther Tania. They're the main people. The gist of the film is this: in Miami, the physicist Zoya Lowe is terminal with a black hole in her chest. She has only 1 week to live. 1 week life. Wait. She has only 1 week life. I mean, that sentence is horrible. 1 week left to live, right? And her husband, Donald, her daughter, Jane, and Jane's fiance, Morris, bring her home to spend her last days comfortably with her family. However, when Zoya bleeds, indicating that she will die, she goes to the bathroom, swallows one mysterious pill that she found when she was 12, and returns 5 days back in her life. Now Zoya wants to research how she could return further and make other choices in life. When she meets the graduation student Paula, she teams up with her to analyze the pill for several 5 days. Oh, it's horribly. This is terrible. I think it's been translated. That's the problem, right? Because our director is Brazilian, and the synopsis was probably translated from Brazilian, which then makes, it's not a perfect thing. But essentially, right, she's trying to find a cure and a way to extend her life. Right, so this was, it was an interesting film, right? It's sci-fi, but it's very lo-fi, right? It's not big and brash or anything like that. It's this kind of, we're trying to tell a more personal tale, right, on time travel. And I kind of like that, right? I like the, big is fun. Like, I like the big space adventures and different time stories, but it's always nice to get, something different, It's like, the crazy thing is, because, she gets diagnosed with a black hole in her chest. Now, when they said that at the start of the film, I'm assuming they're talking about, something else, right? Like, people have holes in the heart, right? Like a pinhole or something like this. So that's what I'm assuming. But it's actually a black hole. But it's very nonchalant, the way they talk about it. So it's kind of funny that we have this, reality that seems pretty much like the one we're in. But they insert these different things, but play it like, this is just anything, right? Like the nanoscopic man. It's just like, this is just stuff, right? Rather than this is like mind blowing and a black hole. What? So it's, we're kind of believing that all of this stuff is just regular for them. So it makes it slightly adjacent to our kind of world, right? So we have this thing going on, this interesting, kind of off-kilter look at things. So when you realize, she's trying to go back in time to, cure herself, right? Extend her life somehow. We kind of see what this film is. And it's, obviously they're trying to find this cure, but also it does seem to be a reflection, It's like we have Zoya looking at her life, looking at the choices. What have I done with myself? And it also, because we get these flashbacks, right? Because the film starts off with a 12-year-old Zoya and her kind of dad narrating a little bit. He reads her these stories as a little girl. So we see her finding these pills. We don't know what it is, though, at first. And then throughout the film, there are these kind of flashbacks to this time. There's flashbacks to her at college, all of this kind of different thing. And then we also have flashbacks, a few flashbacks for Paula. And kind of in these flashbacks, sometimes we see an event that Zoya has spoken about previously. And so what is also interesting is, like, Zoya might say one thing, but the flashback is slightly different. Now, it's not hugely different, right? But there's a slight difference at times, which then kind of makes you go, oh, okay. Right? Because how we always remember, like, we can remember things, right? And go, oh, this happened like this. And someone else might be like, I mean, it didn't happen like that. It was slightly different, right? And you might be very much in line for most of it, but then there's a slight deviance, And we're kind of seeing that. So it's kind of like, what is Zoya actually remembering? You know what I mean? How much of that has she skewered to help her coalesce with some of the choices she made, right? For not maybe pursuing something that she may have wanted. So we have all of this, which is intriguing. That's really intriguing because it's the human condition, essentially. Now, I think with a film like this, you have several characters. Now, it's not packed with like thousands of different people, but there are several people here, like Donald, her husband, Jane, her daughter, and they don't really get a lot of playing time, but then even the professor, not a lot of playing time. And there are some interesting things, right? These interesting components, because this is the connective tissue with Zoya. But, some of it is just surface level. And it just feels like, I wish there was more here. You know what I mean? I think that's a big thing. Like, you wish there could have been more at times, right? And especially, Paula is interesting, and Paula, as a foil to Zoya, helps you kind of, move the story in a certain way, ask certain questions, But again, we still don't get a huge lot on Paula. So the film, it's an interesting idea. And, it's that kind of bare bones drama, that bare bones approach at telling this story, which works in a way, but also suffers from lack of exploration in certain avenues, I felt. The performances, from Mary-Louise Parker and Ayo Edebiri were very good, especially the moments, like there's a bit when Paula is telling the story, and we really see the emotion on Edebiri's face, and it's just like, oh man, right? She really did nail that. And right, with Mary, she also, really gives us the emotional component of Zoya, right? And I think the end of the film, because it is that kind of realization of, right? So it's not a bad ending, you know? It's not a bad ending. And the kind of realization that has been come to is good. There's the part that feels a little rushed. That's all I can say, because, anything else is kind of spoiling things, right? There is this bit where you think, it feels a little rushed, right? And it could have had a more impactful, emotional, hit if they could have found a different entry to it, But it's interesting. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, I think there was this film, it's from a few years back, right? Safety Not Guaranteed, I believe it was called. And that was it was this sci-fi film, but it was this very lo-fi one that you kind of wondered, is this sci-fi? Is it sci-fi? And then at the very end you get hit with this thing, you're like, oh shit, okay, right? And it's very interesting. I really enjoyed that film. And Omni Loop does remind me of that, in the fact of, right, it's taking this interesting look and it's kind of giving you this world that you kind of wonder, is it this thing? I'm not quite sure, right? There's also, what was this film called? It was Encounter, right, with Riz Ahmed starring. And that, again, it was this really interesting story around kind of mental health. And you wondered, is it a sci-fi film? Right? And it's really walking that line. And then you realize, what it is, right? And that was really interesting. And I think, as I say, Omni Loop reminded me of Safety Not Guaranteed and Encounter. Now, I think those two were stronger films. But if you liked those films, then I think you'll find this intriguing, I believe so, right? As I said, it's interesting. It's not perfect. And I think if they could have just addressed certain things, you're getting a bigger emotional impact. But, it is interesting. There are some really good components of it. There's this bit of music that is played throughout, right, as a bed, which it's a really nice piece of music. There were times though where you're just we don't necessarily need it for this moment, or we didn't need it as long within that moment, but the music itself is really nice. So yeah, there's these components of the film that are very good, but as a whole, it doesn't necessarily all perfectly come together. But yes, if you enjoyed Encounter, if you enjoyed Safety Not Guaranteed, I think the Omni Loop will be of interest. It is out now on all your favorite VODs. Omni Loop.